Good evening and welcome to Poland Daily. I'm Nicholas Richardson and this is the news. 168 days of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. The military airfield in Russian-occupied Crimea, which was attacked yesterday, was a base for aircraft bombing targets in Ukraine. Su-30 fighters and Su-24 bombers were stationed there. The damage to the airfield is significant. And if in the process 10 more aircraft were destroyed, it is very good news, says the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense.
One person was killed in an explosion at the Russian airbase in Novofedorivka, Crimea. The facility was the base for planes bombing targets in Ukraine. According to Moscow, the explosions were caused by the detonation ammunition stored there. We rested, nothing happened. It was quiet and peaceful, and suddenly there was a loud explosion. The house shook, the windows were broken. I shouted for everyone to lie on the floor and crawl into the bathroom. Then we heard more explosions. According to unconfirmed reports, the base was attacked using Ukrainian missiles, but the Ukrainian side is not responsible for the explosions. However, President Volodymyr Zelensky announced that the presence of Russian occupiers in Crimea is a threat to all of Europe, and the Black Sea region will not be a safe place as long as the peninsula is occupied. There can be no stable and lasting peace for the countries on the shores of the Mediterranean Sea as long as Russia uses our peninsula as a military base. This Russian war against Ukraine and against all free Europe began in Crimea and must end in Crimea, end with its liberation. In turn, in Bucha near Kiev, a burial ceremony was organized for another 15 people, whose bodies were found 4 months after the Russians withdrew from this area. 14 bodies could not be identified. All victims were either shot or burned in cars. We found the charred body of a woman who was burned here. All the bodies that died from the shots show signs of torture. Thanks to the DNA testing procedure, we will be able to determine any relationship between the dead in order to be able to bury them together. In response to the appeal of Volodymyr Zelensky, who ordered the forced evacuation of people in the east of the country, many Ukrainians from the occupied territories have already left their homes. However, many older family members who were attached to their surroundings did not leave. The authorities and services appealed to these residents, among others from Donetsk, to join their families. Dear Grandpa, I love you very much. Please come to us. You know no one is as important to me as you. Please take your things and come. We have already prepared everything for you. If something happens to you, I don't know what I'm going to do with myself. Please, Grandpa. Over the past 24 hours, Russian forces continued firing in the Donbass, Kharkiv, and Kherson regions. This morning, there was an attack in the Zaporizhia region, damaging many civil buildings and power networks.
As of today, EU countries cannot import Russian coal, as the transition period provided for in the fifth package of EU sanctions adopted in April has ended. In contrast, according to data published by Rzeczpospolita, the sanctions imposed on Russia so far are clearly working. Poland decided to cut the supply of Russian resources in April.
These are decisions which have been taken unanimously in Council. Okay? So you expect that the member states will obviously implement the decisions that they have taken themselves. Of course, we will continue to monitor the situation, but we have no doubt that the member states will implement these decisions since they are part of a very coherent strategy vis-à-vis Russia when it comes to fossil fuels, which have been laid out in a whole series of documents, as I have just said before.
Some experts believe that the embargo on Russian coal is a symbolic gesture because Russia earns much more income from other sources. 60% of Russian revenues come from oil and gas exports. However, as Marek Budjish noted, this and other sanctions are necessary due to the Russian attack on Ukraine. Rather, we have to speak here of a certain sum of decisions about a policy, the aim of which is mainly to deprive Russia of the possibility of pursuing an aggressive policy using military potential. And Russia, lacking the means, may not be able to rebuild this potential as quickly as it would like. It was Poland that spoke loudly about the Russian threat and was the first to give up Russian coal. In many cases, these sanctions are obviously dictated by the brutality of war, the response to what we are seeing, war crimes. According to analysts, in sectors most dependent on international supply chains, inflation is as high as 60%. An example of Russia's problems is the sale of cars and motorcycles, which in February this year amounted to over 114,000, while in June fewer than 28,000. 70 billion of private money has fled Russia, along with rich Russians, along with companies that have left Russia. Russian propagandists say Russia is losing nothing from European sanctions because it has a rich Asian market. The reality, however, is different. The European market was the most lucrative from the point of view of the profitability of these exports. Secondly, the Russians, when looking for new customers for their raw materials under sanctions, have to sell them much more cheaply, which reduces the profitability of these exports. The European Union has imposed 6 packages of sanctions on Moscow since the beginning of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. They concern, among others, finance, energy and industry. Ukraine is constantly asking for support in the war against a more powerful enemy. The Comex scandal, which concerns tax manipulation consisting in repeated tax refunds on the trading of shares on the dividend payment date, is sweeping through Germany. The practice led to the German state treasury losing billions. The current German Chancellor, Olaf Scholz, is involved in the case.
The Comex transaction was about trading in shares on the dividend payout date to obtain multiple refunds of the capital gains tax, which in fact was only paid once. It was possible due to loopholes in tax regulations. As a result, the German tax authorities lost billions of euros. A parliamentary committee of inquiry in Hamburg is trying to establish what influence the local Social Democratic Party politicians of the time, including Scholz, had on the case of the local Warburg Bank implicated in the scandal. In November 2016, 47 million euros of tax receivables were waived. Scholz was the mayor of the city at the time, and the current head of the city government, Peter Tschentscher, was the Minister of Finance. Scholz claims he remembers nothing and rules out political influence.
United States President Joe Biden has signed the documents endorsing Finland and Sweden's accession to NATO, the most significant expansion of the military alliance since the 1990s, as it responds to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Biden signed the United States Instrument of Ratification, welcoming the two countries, a final step for their endorsement by the United States.
And today, we take another important step toward bringing Sweden and Finland in NATO. In just a few minutes, I'm going to sign the U.S. Instrument of Ratification, making the United States the 23rd ally to approve Sweden and Finland's membership to the strongest, most powerful defensive alliance in the history of the world. Together with our allies and partners, we're going to write the future we want to see, the future we want to see. And in a moment when Putin's Russia has shattered peace and security in Europe, when autocrats are challenging the very foundations of a rule-based order, the strength of the transatlantic alliance and America's commitment to NATO is more important than it's ever been.
The United States Senate backed the expansion by an overwhelming 95-1 last week, a rare display of bipartisan unity in a bitterly divided Washington. Both Democratic and Republican senators strongly approved membership for the two Nordic countries, describing them as important allies whose modern militaries already worked closely with NATO.
Putin thought he could break us apart when this all started. He believed he could break us apart, in my view, weaken our resolve. Instead, he's getting exactly what he did not want. He wanted the Finlandization of NATO, but he's getting the NATOization of Finland along with Sweden.
NATO's 30 allies signed the accession protocol for Sweden and Finland last month, allowing them to join the nuclear-armed alliance once all member states ratify the decision. The accession must be ratified by the parliaments of all 30 North Atlantic Treaty Organization members before Finland and Sweden can be protected by Article 5, the defense clause stating that an attack on one ally is an attack on all. Ratification could take up to 1 year, although accession has already been approved by a few countries, including Canada, Germany and Italy. That's the news. Thank you for watching. Stay with us for the weather, Poland Daily Business and more programmes. But from me, it's have a good night and a better tomorrow.